Hey, what's up guys? Lesson 6. This is the final lesson. I know I said that last time, but this one actually is. And we're going to create our quote table view controller to hold all the quotes. And we're going to use the navigation controller in order to control the segue, and we're going to perform segues. So few important things to learn in this one. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create the new table view controller, and simply do that. Go onto the main storyboard and we drag a table view controller. And I'll put that right there, and I like to line them up evenly, but it's not happening. Okay, there we go. And so now we have this new one, and let's go ahead and set up that view controller. So we're going to go into File, Create New File, Cocoa Touch Class. We want to call this one, it needs to be a table view controller. Make sure you don't select Collection View Controller. They're very similar. By the way, the Collection View Controller gives you a little bit more flexibility, like you can scroll horizontally and things like that. In the table view controller, that's not the author one, we're going to do the quote one. It's going to be inside controller. And there we go. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to delete all this boilerplate code. We do want to leave cell for row at index path, which is the top one that's commented out. Which, by the way, guys, I don't know if I discussed this earlier, but in order to add a comment, it's really good to add comments to yourself, in the beginning as you're building an app, to show like, oh, this is how I got there, or especially if there's multiple people working on an app, and then you can use comments to say exactly what it is. But a comment is just 2 forward slashes. And the way they do it is if you want to do multiple lines, instead of just doing 2 and then 2, all that, you can do the forward slash and then an asterisk. And then whenever you want it to end, you do an asterisk and a forward slash. And so there you go, there's comments really quick. We do need this in here. So let's go ahead and connect these two. This is kind of in the way. We don't use launch screen, so let's just drag it out here so that we don't get confused and everything. So in the storyboard, we have this, and we're going to go into the class declaration, and we want it to refer to the quote table view controller. So now these two talk to each other. So this, we need to take out more boilerplate code. And let's go ahead and bring in the quote array from the other class. Quotes equals quote array dot list. Oh yeah, and the parentheses. All right, and now we're gonna set all this other stuff. Number of sections, we just want 1 section like in the other one. And then number of rows, we want to count the quote array, so quotes.count. And we have to return that. It's expecting us to return an integer. See, so this function here is expecting an output. That's why this arrow is pointing towards integer. So they want input. So that's why you have to say return something. So like in this one, is expecting an output of a UI table view cell. So we have to return the cell. Now let's get these two talking to each other like we did earlier. Now in the main storyboard, we're going to drag a label on. And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. We're going to drag the label onto here, and then we're going to connect it to the quote table view controller. And then we're going to change the text of this label to the quote text. So you know what? If you guys want to like pause and see if you can get it done yourself, I think that'd be great, because it's a lot like what we did here. But if you want to keep watching, or to check the answer, So now I'm going to show you how to solve it. And in order to do that, we need to create a new table view cell. And we're going to go File, New File, Cocoa Touch Class, Table View Cell, and it's going to be the quote table view cell. And we want it to be in the view. We don't need any of this stuff. And then we're going to go into the main storyboard, and we're going to go into, click the table view cell, and in the class thing up here, we want to tell it that you're actually going to talk to quote table view cell. So then we open up the assistant. That's the author. This is the quote. No, we don't want the view controller. See, and then sometimes it tries to give me all this interface stuff. There we go. And we just need to drag this label into here. And we're going to call it, what, quote label. Yeah, let's do that. I didn't want to use the same as something I've already used. There we go. So that step is done. Now what we have to do in the quote table view controller, and it says let cell equal DQ reservoir cell with reuse identifier. We actually want to call that quote cell. And so let's go back into the storyboard and go into here where, there we go, and we go to where it says reuse identifier, we call it quote cell. And you know, actually at this point I'm gonna build the project just to get everything to compile and talk to each other. And here we do have some problems with auto layout, so let's go solve those really quick. Let's see, trailing constraint is missing without any layout constraints. So this one, basically, one of the complaints is that this one has no constraints. And in order to fix that, we're gonna 0, 0, 0. And we're going to add those constraints. And so that one is fixed. Trailing constraint is missing. So over here, basically what it's saying is that this text, because it has no write constraint, can just run right into this image view and bulldoze it over. And it would look really sloppy. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 0 right there, so that whenever you set an auto layout constraint, and like if I say 0, it's not going to go to the end of the view here, it's going to go to the end of the image view. So it says the closest object to it is basically what you're setting the constraints to. And so see how it goes right to the edge there. So that's good. There's a couple more. Quote table view has no entry points, which is obvious. We're going to have to, that's the navigation controller thing that we're going to do in a minute here. So let's bring this back down. And it's built. The next step is to cast it as the quote table view cell so that we can use the quote text that we have, or the quote label that's in there. And we're going to do cell dot quote label dot text equals quotes index path dot row. And then from that we're going to select quote text. And so now we got that done. Now let's go solve this last problem, which was saying unreachable because it has no entry points. So what we're going to use here is the navigation controller. And before we go into it, let me talk a little bit about what it is. Prepared a slide. And it's a drag and drop item from the library, like the table view controller and everything. It contains a root view controller, which right here, that's what it's pointing to, is the root view controller. And it also adds a navigation bar to the top to make navigation easier, as we'll see. And it can be modified in code. So you can change the text of the bar and a lot of things like that in a navigation controller. So now that I'm done explaining it, let's just throw one in there. Navigation controller. See, there's its technical definition. Manages navigation through a hierarchy of views. That's what it's there for. That's what it does. And so we're going to take this. See this, so that's what this arrow is like. When we open up the app, what's the first view we're going to open up? So this arrow needs to be pointing to the navigation controller. And then this root view controller, we're just going to delete that. And we're going to make the author table view controller the root view controller. So you want to select this up here, drag it, and say relationship segue root view controller. And see, it adds a little navigation bar to the top. And I'm going to take this. I'm going to drag it over here. And this is, we're going to do show. And now, so now the quote table view controller does have an entry point, which so if we build, then this problem should go away. And so we have another one that says that the segues must have a reuse identifier, or not a reuse identifier. That's for the table view cell, but it does have to have an identifier in a very similar fashion. So when you click the segue itself, it'll pop up, and you need to give it an identifier. And we're going to say go to quotes and hit enter. That's going to be that segue. And so before we call on the segue, I have a couple more slides on the segue, or one slide on the segue. So here's an example of a segue. It's the one we're about to do. They're called in code with the perform segue function, which is right here. And then you can transfer data between the views with prepare for segue, which is another thing we're going to do in a minute. And it can be done in the storyboard or programmatically. So let me show you how to do it in the storyboard. I'm not going to do it for this one, but see, so you could take author cell and just control drag it over here, and you could say selection segue and show. And so if I click that, every time I select this this cell, then it'll segue into this. But I don't want to do that because it's not reusable. This segue is not reusable. If you have multiple, like say I put something up here that was like a help screen, to help people with the app, or settings, and you click on that, and then then you have to control drag from the settings up here to do whatever, and then you have 100 of these arrows coming out of your app, all for different reasons. It's best just to come up here and control drag, at least in my opinion, over here, and create a segue that has an identifier, and then you call the identifier in the app. So we're going to do that right now. And in order to do that, we're going to have to go into did SelectRow, which is, this function is just called when you select one of the rows. And we're going to perform segue with identifier go to quotes. And make sure that that is the exact spelling, because again, anything that's in quotes is, you have to spell it right, because there's no like autocorrect or anything. So let's check out and see if that worked. All right, so we click on this, and there's all the quotes. So they're not they're not named, they're not under the right name yet, but the fact that it is getting us from here to there is a step in the right direction. So now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to fix up these, we're going to get all the data to pass to the right places. First, I want to make a little UI improvement on the top. We're going to change the navigation bar, what the title says. We want it to say author in quotes and everything. So we're going to go in here. And for that one, I'm going to do author. But that creates a problem, and it's that we can't have a title on here, at least in the storyboard. We can't set it in the storyboard, so whenever you hit a wall like this where you can't do something in the storyboard, there's pretty much a guaranteed way to do it in the code. So we're going to go into the code, into the quote table view controller, and under view did load, and it's very simple. We're just going to set self, which is referring, as you see right here, referring to the table view controller. I'm going to say self.title, which is a simple string, and it's just going to equal quotes. Or no, we just want the word quotes. We don't want any of the objects we've made. So now we have the authors and the quotes. Let's see if that works. Authors and quotes. And yeah, just I wanted to use the plural. There we go. Alright, so everything's going smoothly. The next step is to make sure that when we click this, we pass the right stuff into here, and we're going to use the filter function in the quote table view controller, and we're going to have to pass over what author was selected in the author table view controller. Next, here in the author table view controller, we're going to prepare for Segue. Need a new function. And in this code, we're going to create a variable that's the destination VC, which stands for view controller. It's going to be segue.destination, and we're going to downcast it as the quote table view controller. And then in this quote view controller, we're going to set destination VC. First we have to go into the quote table view controller, and we have to create a variable called selected author. And we're just going to set that equal to an empty string for right now. This is what we're going to fill, and we're going to tell it right now. Destination VC dot selected author. We're going to have to build. Hopefully that still did the trick, even though yeah, there we go. And next we're going to wrap this in a conditional statement so that it creates a little bit more safety within the app. And this one is called an if let. It also creates a new variable or constant in our case. And so if let index path equals table view dot index path for selected row. And then so it's saying if we're going to create a new constant called index path, and it equals table view index path selected row, then we're going to do the following in here. And then we want to use author array index path dot row dot author name. And then down here we're going to put print author array index path dot row dot author name, just to make sure we're getting the right one, because we're not we haven't filtered anything in the quote table view controller yet, so it's not going to show up properly, but I still want to run it just to see that when we select the row that we're getting the right name. And so when we click this, yes, something should pop up down here in your debugger that's going to read out Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever, whatever you put in there, whatever you clicked. So that's a good sign. Also, this is a very handy way to debug things, is to print whatever it is that you're looking to, that you're having trouble with, whether it's a string or an integer or a boolean. You can print all those. So very handy, easy way to debug things. Now that everything's working, we're going to go in and we're going to filter this array. And to do that, we're going to create a new function. It's filter results by author. And in here, we're going to take our quotes, which is the array, and we're going to set it equal to quotes, which also is the array, and it's going to be filter. And then in here, once we have this highlighted, you're going to hit enter, and it creates a closure. And the input's going to be quote. And I'm going to say quote. This one, quote dot author name dot contains, and you want it to contain the selected author variable up here. So there we go, quick simple filtering. And now we're going to call it in our view did load. And we're going to build and run. Let's see how it goes. I'll be back. There we go. And we're looking good. Now there is something that's kind of bugging me off this, is like, see this one just ends, and it truncates, I guess, with the 3 dots, Tell you there's more, but you can't see it. So that kind of gets on my nerves. So let's just fix that bug, and then we're done. Let's go into the main storyboard. I want to click this and go into the inspector here, and we want to tell it, where it says line break, we want to tell it word wrap. And if you build and run, you're going to see that it's so it's not having the ellipses there, but it's still just running off the screen, and that's because the table view cell doesn't know to adjust to the word wrapping, and the label doesn't really know when the table view ends. Even though, I really think that AutoLayout should handle this kind of stuff, but Swift is a pretty new language, so they're going through some stuff, but I really like the language, and I think it's got a bright future. To fix this, there's just one last little AutoLayout thing. Over here it says lines, and it says one line. You want to set that to 0, because see, it says 1, and it's just automatically it's going to stick to one line. But if you say 0, it says, okay, we're going to use AutoLayout to determine how many lines are in it, and we're going to show it as so. So even if it gets longer, 3 or 4 lines, it'll get that right. You could select 2 lines and have a temporary fix, but it wouldn't work forever. But if we'll run it here and see that it's working. So you know what? There we go, guys. There's the app. We got this last one done in under 25 minutes. It's great. I was expecting a little bit more time. Oh yeah, I've got like 30 seconds to just go over. I made the last slide just some best practices that I've learned from watching a lot of tutorials like you guys are watching right now, and we're going to go over some of them. Dry, DRY, don't repeat yourself. Something like, like we did earlier where we created a let constant and referred to that. It saves a lot of typing. Which also comes in with the be lazy, a little bit of both. Try to shorten your code. You want it succinct. You want it. You don't want to have 1,000 lines of code if you only need, 15. And that's a problem that a lot of beginner developers are using. Trust me, if you're just starting out as a developer, just get it to work. That's the most important thing. I still do that when I'm unfamiliar with the technology or a feature in Swift or something. Like I'll write, you know, so much code, and then I'll kind of go back and see, oh, where can I clean this up? Make your code readable to other developers, and that kind of comes in with the camel case. You want to name everything like they know what you're talking about. Like if someone else picked it up and had never worked on the app, that they could look at the code, and if they're a Swift developer, of course, be able to understand what's going on. And you know, practice consistently. There's one thing I've seen on Twitter, which goes into networking online. I think Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, anywhere you can find groups of Swift developers. Meetup is one that even takes it offline. So if you're better offline, find a meetup group. So back to what I was saying here about practice consistently. There's currently a thing on Twitter that I've seen from Paul Hudson, hackingwithswift.com, and he has a 100 Days of Swift challenge. So I'd say if you Google 100 Days of Swift, his website, hackingwithswift.com. I'm not affiliated with him, just someone that, you know, likes that his material is good and free. So check that out. And yeah, let me know how you like this video. I look forward to posting a lot more and helping a lot of you on your journey. And yeah, keep in touch. Thanks, guys.